Hi everyone, and welcome to the OpenStack and Beyond podcast. Today is Wednesday, June 8th, 2016. My name is Jeremy Hess, filling in for Arthur Rezin, and this is episode 11, and we're going to be discussing OpenStack Day Israel 2016. We'll do a bit of a recap on the event, discuss with some of the speakers and sponsors that we have as guests about their experience in this year's event, as well as some of the different things they're working on right now in OpenStack. So first of all, Nati, of course, the host, how are you doing? Nati, you there? We've already lost him? Wow, that was quick. Okay, so if Nati is not available, then what we'll do is we can go straight into talking with everyone. We can do a little bit of a recap on the event and OpenStack in general. So Frank, how about if you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the state of OpenStack right now and what you saw OpenStack Israel giving towards that goal of OpenStack in general.
Hi Jeremy, thanks for this opportunity. So I'm Frank Wijns, I'm the director of OpenStack International for Rackspace, and I was really surprised to see the energy in the people at the OpenStack event in Israel. I was warned that they said there's going to be enthusiastic people, but for me the most important thing what I saw was also the military in the room. I see the passion, I see the men and the people who want to go forward. One of the things that I discussed was indeed how can we make OpenStack consumable for the larger enterprises who don't want to invest in OpenStack teams and things. And that's what we see now. It's really the change in OpenStack and also in Israel between the developers and the people who want to consume it. And I must say, very impressed with what I saw, Jeremy.
I'm glad to hear. Nati, did we get you back?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so Frank was just talking a little bit about his talk and what he's seen in terms of the excitement of the event and the energy and all that. So I'd like to ask Oded also introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you're seeing internationally and in Israel.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. My name is Oded Shichor, and I'm the Cloud Chief Technologist for HPE, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, in the region of Europe, Middle East, and Africa, EMEA. With my role, I'm actually working with global accounts, strategic accounts of HPE in the world for different cloud work streams. And OpenStack is for sure one of the major work streams that I'm working with these accounts. And I was quite excited to see the enthusiasm of the Israeli market in the latest OpenStack event a few days back. It was so inspiring to see over 500 people, I believe, in the event, and to see the military, as Frank said, it is a rare occasion where the military is actually on stage stating what are they doing with OpenStack and their intention to embrace OpenStack. So it was quite inspiring to see this. In my global role, dealing with other customers, I see banks, I see healthcare companies adopting OpenStack, and it is really there. So I see enterprises are adopting OpenStack extensively.
Interesting.
Also in Israel, by the way, also in Israel. So we see also a lot of business in Israel currently with HPE, with OpenStack. We have several deals running, and to see enterprises like banks, like governments embracing OpenStack, it's great.
Excellent. So I think Liaz, you're kind of representing the startup community here in the Silicon Valley. Maybe you could comment about your perspective of the event and OpenStack in general.
Yes. Hi. Good evening to everyone. I'm Liaz Kemper from Stratoscale. I'm a tech leader in the networking group here, and first of all, it was a great turn up for my talk and generally for the whole day. I want to congratulate you for a very good event. I've seen several events in the past, and that was impressive. It's great to feel that you belong to a community. the community is very diverse. I think that was the best thing to see, and it was very inspiring. You could see people turning up from conservative organizations as the IDI. You could see people from startups. You can see people from ecosystem stretching from the hardware, which was Mellanox, who gave a great talk, to big players like Rackspace, IBM, lots of innovation. So it's very good to see that the ecosystem is very diverse. I would expect to see more startups in OpenStack. Maybe a fact that many startups were already bought and merged into big players kind of sets people, maybe startups, from saying, okay, I don't have the amount of innovation that will allow me to succeed in this field. I think that's a wrong attitude. I think SDN and NFV should supply enough greenfield for innovation, and I hope to see more innovation, especially in this field, in the future. Stratoscale believes in OpenStack, but it believes that the OpenStack needs to, as a vanilla OpenStack is good, but it's not something that the conservative organization or other organization can apply easily. So we build our own infrastructure wrapped around OpenStack. But still, I think OpenStack is a great engine, and it has a lot of innovation. And the fact that many startups believe that OpenStack API is the API to go with just emphasizes how much OpenStack is influencing the market, just like I think AWS API is influencing the market right now.
That's great. Thanks, Liaz. I'm wondering if Nati might have dropped off again. So, Dudu, there you are. Okay. So, Dudu, we also have you on the line. Would you like to introduce yourself and what you do and how you felt about the event and, in general, how you feel what's going on with OpenStack?
Hi, my name is Dudu Slama, Director of Cloud Solution and Software Management in Mellanox. From my point of view, the OpenStack Day was a great success. If we look at the last events during the last 4 years, this one was the best of all from my point of view. Many companies sent representatives. There were almost 500 people, I think, including a representative from the IDF. Big Israeli companies like Mellanox, international companies like HP, VMware, Red Hat, and also a representative from startups, Israeli startups. The talks were very professional with the representative from Red Hat like Livnat Peer and Gal Sagi from Dragonflow, also areas from my company, and also from the IDF. I really like the talk of the IDF because that's the first time that we saw guys from the Israeli army that talk about OpenStack, about the effort to join this effort together with the rest of the world, but also to keep the security and the other stuff in their side and not to expose all the security issues to the rest of the world.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Dudu. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a new feeling. And interestingly enough, the meetups that we have in the OpenStack Israel community always include at least one or two guys from the IDF that I guess are there to, again, push this idea of having OpenStack, in the IDF in various different divisions. So it's really good to see. Nati, so what did you think about the event, the setup, the keynotes, the award ceremonies, everything?
Yeah, so first of all, this is my 7th event, and Jeremy, I must say that this is the first time that I was taking the back seat and had the chance to enjoy the event itself, and a lot of that thanks to you. So greetings for that. Also, I think if I compare it to, past year's event, and again being on all the events actually as an organizer. I think that this event was a turning point and a defining moment, even to that degree, because I think we kind of crossed the point in which there was a question: is that going to happen? Is that real? The Israeli market is going to adopt it or not? And all of a sudden, I think in this year, we started to see, kind of moving to the point of no return. With all the things that we've seen, and I'll get to Frank in just one second, but I think also having private hosted was important. Starting to see startup adopting it was also something that I was really waiting for to see, because this is kind of a litmus test for the Israeli market for any technology to succeed here in large scale. And also, obviously, seeing companies, well-established public companies like Mellanox investing in OpenStack and putting, a real contribution and adopting the open source model, even though it's not something that comes natively with a business model. That was quite encouraging. And the speed in which, I've been talking to Dudu for a while, the speed in which it happened, I think, from our last discussion, that was also very interesting. One other thing that, coming from Gigaspaces is that obviously I'm representing also the Gigaspace side of the story here in this call, is Cloudify. We've been mentioned for the first time on stage on the summit itself, and the second time in a row on the user survey, alongside Mesos and kind of the big celebrities. So for me, that was kind of a moment of pride to be among that list and see the success of kind of a lot of year work. So that's kind of a personal note to that.
Yeah, and going back to Mellanox, we were mentioning that Kobe Holzer of LivePerson got an award, and then the Mellanox team got an award themselves. We felt that the contributions are really at their peak, or at the highest we've ever seen them, I should say, from the Israeli community to OpenStack internationally. And it was really amazing to see Kobe Holzer at the Austin Summit on stage with Mark Collier discussing what LivePerson is doing. And of course, that's why we decided to give these awards, because we just have such, it's so amazing to see the passion and everything coming out of the OpenStack Israel community. And it's, I think, really having more and more of an impact, and I hope to keep seeing that in the future. So, Frank.
Yes, I think certainly what you see is just like Nati said, it's the point of no return is passed. From Maxbase, I can't go in every customer that we sign up, but the nice thing is that we see now a lot of traction in the financials, but also, for example, in the automotive or in the retail. And also we see, for example, in financial sectors where companies are interested in OpenStack, but how do we consume it? So I'm very proud that Rackspace partner Bezek International was mentioned during the OpenStack day, and we even had discussions about it. So now OpenStack is out of the research center, it's now in production, and people in Israel can consume it in Israel, or they can work with it, they can play with it. But I would say now, what can we do? What can OpenStack achieve more? Is now we can really land all those applications, make sure that we can use it in production, that it goes further, that it now is making money for the people in Israel, and that's what I like.
Excellent, Frank. So a question, I think, to Oded about the acquisition of ContextStream and the R&D center here in Israel.
Yeah.
How much is that kind of, in your view, helping the work? I know that you've been working on OpenStack in Israel here specifically for a while. How much the fact that we have an R&D center here is influential, or is that completely irrelevant?
On the contrary, it's crucial. I think it contributes a lot. I think HPE, globally is positioning OpenStack as one of the most important technologies that it drives. We contribute a lot. As you know, we are usually either number two, number one in contribution for the OpenStack project. I think for Mitaka, we were rated number two for the key metrics like lines of code, number of engineers, etc. And specifically for Israel, HPE sees a lot of value in the R&D center that we have here in Israel. So we have around 1,200 people, I believe, in the HP Software R&D Center. We have also key contributors for OpenStack based here in Tel Aviv. So Duncan Thomas is a core Cinder developer based here in Tel Aviv. And he was also present at the event. He attended the event. It was great. He catch up with a lot of people from the foundation. And Context Stream specifically that you mentioned is a very important acquisition related to open source and OpenStack. So for the people that do not know Context Stream, so Context Stream is developed a telco-grade, carrier-grade software-defined networking solution based on Open Daylight. And when we are speaking about OpenStack, it's important to remember that OpenStack has an ecosystem of other open source based technologies. And Open Daylight is for sure one of the most important ones. Telco operators and carriers look at Open Daylight, look at OpenStack. And Sar Gilai, our Senior Vice President for the Communication and Solutions business, which happen to be also an Israeli person. It's an honor for us that we have an Israeli that is such a high rank in the HPE hierarchy, invested in Israel and acquired Context Stream, I believe, 1 year ago. And we have come and developed a full suite of solutions for the telcos that would like to run NFV, Network Function Virtualization. So we included in this suite both the Context Stream software-defined network controller, which is named ContextNet, but also a Helion carrier-grade OpenStack solution. So we took OpenStack, we took our commercial distribution of OpenStack named Helion, and we hardened it and made it acceptable by the telco requirements, by the carrier-grade requirements. And together it makes...
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Adam.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that's an excellent segue to David. David, I think Mellanox, as well as a networking company, high kind of position in the high performance side of the story. Maybe you could comment about NFV and OpenStack. I know that there's been discussion, should OpenStack do only NFV, or should it be one of the things that OpenStack is doing? What's your take on that?
Actually, I'm very happy about this question, because this is the first time that we saw that the community of OpenStack starting talk about the NFV activity and about performance and latency and also scalability and other things that we already talked in Mellanox during the last 5 years. We all the time meet people and companies and discuss about this. I believe that this is the story of Mellanox, to be there and to solve issues that are very critical for the NFV, especially the latency, the quality of service, the security, all the other stuff that can improve all the virtual function to run efficiently on the cloud.
And what brought Mellanox to be a contributor to OpenStack? I know that this is not natural to your business to do software development in general and specifically contribution to open source projects.
Actually, our effort is especially in the Neutron project, Nova project, also in Cinder, because we have the ICER protocol to improve and accelerate storage traffic. Same story for the Neutron. We push all the code for the SIRV. We were part of the first SRV code to Neutron, and we have the ML2 plugin that interact with our software solution in Mellanox Neo, that analyze fabric and activities and connectivities between all the network elements, and recommend about the right place to deploy NFV and the virtual function for the customers.
Interesting. Now, Liaz, I think that in the case of Stratoscale, for those who are less familiar with Stratoscale, is really using the OpenStack as an API, as a layer that can abstract the infrastructure. And actually, this is an interesting way of using OpenStack, not by taking just the source code from the community and hardening it. It's more than that. You're actually changing a lot of the bits and bytes behind it and kind of creating a more robust or more performant implementation of it. Is that the right way to look into that?
I think, first of all, yes. That was a very good description of Stratoscale. I think what happens with OpenStack is what happened with Linux. People, they said, well, okay, Linux kernel, the vanilla is great. It's a great start, but it's not something you can consume. It's something you need to build around it. Maybe a distribution, maybe something that will make it better for a specific purpose, for a general purpose. And this is what happens with OpenStack. Stratoscale, as you said, is a company which is not an OpenStack distribution per se. It supplies an OpenStack, a full compliant OpenStack API. It believes that an OpenStack API is something which is that is a must in the cloud. We're getting a lot of questions and prospects from prospects and customers saying, do you support OpenStack API? What is the performance? Like Dudu said, if we would talk with customers 3 years ago, they wouldn't know what OpenStack is. Now they're very knowledgeable. Some customers that we approach or we already have deals with, they already have their own orchestration running OpenStack. Maybe I think Cloudify is a good example. So OpenStack is the standard. If you want to be a startup, a successful startup, you need to comply with this standard, and you need to make this standard, I mean, the API or how people relate to OpenStack even better. As I said before, there is a lot of place for innovation in this field, and we believe that we deliver this innovation. And I believe there's a lot of room for other startups as well to deliver maybe other aspects of innovation. Again, SDN, NFV, so on.
And I would add to that we're starting to see other kind of implementation that are taking similar approach. I think Platform 9 is giving this type of hosted, semi-hosted OpenStack implementation that is using kind of same principle. Even to a degree, VMware Bio is also taking similar ideas of using the API as a way to plug into their own infrastructure. I can think about a few other examples that are coming into that. The other thing that I think is important is not the fact that there's more diversity and options to use OpenStack and different kind of implementation, but also the fact that you have different ways to consume it, both from a distro running on your local environment and private hosted. We're not seeing, and maybe Oded, that's a good segue to you, too much public cloud adopting OpenStack. And I know that HP had a public OpenStack. It turned away from that point. Why isn't there enough public cloud based on OpenStack in your view?
It's a good question. So first of all, let me address the shutdown of the HP public cloud based on OpenStack. So indeed, we started, I believe it was 2011, when we started our public cloud experience based on OpenStack. I think it went live in 2012. And we did a lot of effort to make OpenStack acceptable to run public cloud workloads. HPE strategy evolved during these years, and we've understood that our customers, which are the enterprises, large enterprises where HPE is usually working, do not consume public cloud in the way that the market thought they will. So they are consuming, but for up to a certain degree, not completely. And it was a huge investment that we ran. So we actually changed the strategy here and decided to partner with other public cloud providers. It doesn't mean that we haven't stopped investing in OpenStack. On the contrary, we invested a lot. And as I said, in Mitaka, we are rated quite good. And also in Newton, we are rated quite good. So we're investing a lot on our private distro and by partnering with others. I believe, coming back to your question, why we don't see too many public cloud based on the OpenStack, it is again related to the question why we don't see a lot of startups using OpenStack. Because again, looking on who is consuming the majority of consumption for public cloud, and it might change in the coming years, but the majority of consumers are still not the enterprises. And if startups do not consume OpenStack in a deep and extensive way, maybe the demand here is less. But I believe Rackspace should answer this well because they are running successfully.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly the next person in line here, Frank. Rackspace has been one of the founders of OpenStack, and obviously at the time, mostly public cloud. Now it looks like you're refocusing towards private cloud and private hosted, and towards managing other public cloud, including Amazon and Azure and so forth. Maybe you could explain how you see OpenStack and public cloud in that context, and where do you see OpenStack being most successful? Is that really in private cloud?
Well, yeah, what we see at the moment is really, it's like the world is going to cloud, but it's with everything, you got several options to go cloud. Our public cloud is very large, it's running OpenStack, but it's not only OpenStack what our public cloud is. It's also the billing around, it's the accounting, it's the servicing, it's the hardware, it's the data centers. So if the cloud solution itself from a public cloud is just a part of it. And then really what we see is you need the scalability to make the economics work. If you don't have a large-scale public cloud like Rackspace, it's very hard to run it and do everything. But I see certainly not OpenStack growing in the public cloud, but I see it certainly growing in the private cloud. And the nice thing about OpenStack is you can even run it on a laptop with an all-in-one, where you can, as a developer, start playing and testing your applications against it. But you can consume it indeed in a public cloud, but also, for example, you can consume it in a private cloud in your company. And the nice thing about private clouds is, and certainly with the legal ways and all the laws in the world, it's data sovereignty. Most of my customers are, for example, using cloud in several countries because of financial restrictions, because of law, and that's where I certainly see the applications now coming from and going to, is when the nice thing, if you develop your application for an OpenStack platform, is you can run it everywhere in the world. Your customers can run it everywhere in the world, and they can consume it indeed how they want it. Okay.
Nathy and Jeremy, I have a topic to raise with regard to this question that were asked. For example, we spoke about the compliancy of APIs for OpenStack, but I think we are missing something that is very important for the private cloud, for the OpenStack distros, and this is the cadency. So the release cycle that each private distro or commercial distro is released. I believe that the vendors that are releasing the distro needs to comply with a certain close to trunk, let's say, policy, because this is what I see customers are looking for.
And what's the reality in your view right now? from from.
So I see these stores that are -2 versus trunk, -1 versus trunk, and I believe that customer will ask and require. They already, at least with the customer that I'm working with, are looking for -half. So they are looking to see how much close they can go to trunk with a stable release. And I believe that this is the mission statement from HP as well. So close to trunk, but enterprise ready. And and this is a good question for all the private all the commercial distros vendors.
So I think that's another question for you, Frank. How do you see that? I mean, how much Rackspace is close to trunk?
Normally we're following trunk. Like I said, we release about 6 months later than trunk. But indeed, that's one of the things that Rackspace is really trying to fix also in the upstream community, is making the upgrades much easier to do. In the early days of OpenStack, if you want to go from one release to another release, it was very clear. You create a new cloud and you migrate all your workloads from the old version to the new version. And now we can make sure that we can upgrade versions without going down. And that's the most important thing, is making sure that we as vendors of OpenStack, the creators of OpenStack, make it easier to consume OpenStack and remove all barriers that could prevent customers of using OpenStack.
Indeed, in-service upgrade is very important for the enterprise.
Yeah.
We see it as well.
Excellent. So I think that's point me to Dudu. I think that given that Mellanox is kind of pointing itself or positioning itself as the high-performance OpenStack, how do you see the performance of OpenStack and how much? I mean, I know that there's been a lot of arguments or a lot of complaints about the fact that developers in open source community don't understand performance and obviously develop things in kind of a naive way, and then someone who needs to run it may have difficulties running it. But having Mellanox as plugged into that can change things in that regard. How do you see the performance of OpenStack in your view?
From Mellanox perspective, our focus is always to enable our hardware offloading capabilities, such as VXLAN offload, OVS offload, etc. Our customers, especially the data centers, the high-performance customers, ask us to check the Ironic project all the time in order to provide high-performance bare metal cloud. I believe that we will see in the next few years a lot of companies from the hyperscale computing that are moving to a private bare metal cloud based on Ironic.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Okay, so I think given the performance, the other question that usually comes with that is the container aspect. The container aspect is really, especially with regard to Kubernetes, and I think that would be a question for you, Liaz. Started as a question: is container going to replace OpenStack, and why do I need OpenStack if I have Kubernetes or if I have Docker? Can you comment on that? How do you see that?
I think when it comes to containers, there are two aspects, and actually we're being asked all of the time about containers in these two aspects. First of all, the workload. Again, some of our customers expect us to have their own workloads as containers, or have a Kubernetes or Kubernetes-like API or interface to orchestrate and manage those containers. So this is one issue we're dealing and we're delivering a very strong vision about. And the second is how do we run OpenStack and our own proprietary services inside containers. And they asked about that as well, because they know containers can point into innovation, into microservicing, and so on. And by the way, this is, I think, it goes along with Stratoscale, but also OpenStack has very good visions about both of them, running containers as workloads and running the services of OpenStack inside containers.
And can you explain a little bit what do you mean by running OpenStack inside containers?
Sure.
For those who are less familiar.
Okay. As you know, you don't know, OpenStack now is running as a service, as any other service in Linux. If you go the usual systemctl, I want to see all the services that's running, you will see the services of OpenStack. Now, the way to go now, especially in modern and innovative systems, is to run the service inside a container. A container allows you to run the service in a namespace, which was very familiar for the developer. So in this case, it's easier to run the OpenStack service and also to run it more efficient and also to develop it.
Mm-hmm. And do you see a trend in which like in terms of the merging between the technology? You could see Magnum as a project which takes Kubernetes and try to put it in OpenStack or make it more first-class citizen. But then we've seen CoreOS in Austin actually running OpenStack with Kubernetes, which was kind of interesting. It's almost the reverse way, which is closer to essentially to what you described. How do you see the two mergers? Is that going to be OpenStack running containers or containers running OpenStack?
Hi, Natif.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah. So, for example, indeed, I have a echo.
Can we get everyone to turn on or to mute themselves when they're not speaking? Thanks.
Okay. So what also at Rackspace, how do we deploy OpenStack? We also deploy it in Linux containers. And the nice thing is, like the advantage is, because OpenStack, it's a framework, it's services, you can change those services by changing the container, so you can play with it. And this is the infrastructure. This is how you abstract all that hardware, and then you can consume that abstraction layer, and on that abstraction layer of OpenStack, you can have, again, containers with the applications on top of it. So yes, we are running containers inside OpenStack. Inside OpenStack, you have containers, and it just depends how what you want to achieve with those containers. And it's just like one of the things is, the nice thing about those open source technologies is that they work perfectly together, and that's nice. I don't think that container is going to take over OpenStack or OpenStack is going to take over containers. No, it's just they're going to work along, and depending what kind of applications, what kind of services you want to use, you will deploy in such way.
Excellent. I think that if I add my personal perspective to that, I think there's also a couple of system level things that are that OpenStack had, like multi-tenancy, user management. Obviously, a lot of the implementation on the networking side that not specifically related, storage included, they're not specifically related to containers, and it becomes more of a question of implementation, the quality of implementation that you would need anyway. And I think that's a clear area, at least right now, that OpenStack can complement the container world and allow enterprises to use it in a in enterprise fashion. So I tend to agree that there's not one way to put the two together. I believe that we'll see a combination of both OpenStack running as containerized. In this case, we're basically using containers as a VM, and also running containers on top of OpenStack. In this case, we're using containers as if you like, an application or kind of a pass or a lightweight pass. So the interesting thing about containers is that it really changes those layers, and it breaks those layers in ways that you wouldn't really think about it before. Now, Dudu, and speaking about containers, how does the networking aspect work with containers, and what does Mellanox does on that regard?
Right now. Can you mute, please? I have echo. Okay. Right now, the focus of Mellanox is to enable RDMA over containers. Right now, it's just the beginning for us. I believe that by Q1 next year, Q2 maybe, we will have RDMA over a container, and I think that this thing will be a game changer for the networking aspect. I believe that this, together with the ASAP square, the obvious offload, will will bring Mellanox into a different scale of customers, and and we will have a huge story for us in this aspect. Can you hear me?
Yes, David, we do.
We do. I wonder if it's not the
Yeah. Sorry, I was just I was left muted. So the question for you was if you could elaborate about about RDMA and why is that important for OpenStack for container users? Because I'm not sure that everyone is familiar with what RDMA is.
As I mentioned, it's this capability, the RDMA with container together will bring Mellanox solution into other scale. I believe that we will solve a lot of the bottlenecks in the networking with this solution. We will have the ability to do offloading for several services in the hardware, and I believe that this, together with the obvious offload, as I mentioned, will be a game changer for the networking.
Excellent. So the next question is for you, Dad, and that would be kind of a closing question, and I would want to do it as in a roundup kind of model, and that's more related to the business model. And I think that AT&T, who's been actually pretty big in this event, both in Austin and here in Israel, they had 30 people presence on site here in Israel, and I think more than 100 in Austin. Which is quite interesting. It's interesting in the sense that it does show that the disruption is happening. The fact that a big carrier is now betting on open source to run its infrastructure, the infrastructure that everyone is using, the video, the telephone, the 3G, that is a proof that it's actually getting to points in which companies like Cisco and others thought that it will never get there. And that breaks a lot of the food chain in terms of the business models. All of a sudden, you cannot sell, gears at very high cost. It's becoming more commoditized. How does companies like HP adopt open source, not just as a technology, but also as a business model?
It's a great question because just if you can mute yourself. Okay, great. It's a great question to be asked because we indeed see the adoption of open source by telcos as a huge driver for new business streams and revenue streams. And we are actively working with a lot of the telcos in the world, actually most of the tier 0, tier 1 telcos for sure, on different NFV work streams. These NFV work streams are mainly based on open source, so the OpenStack and Open Daylight. I think HPE is positioned very well because, again, our leadership, like Martin Fink, who is a long-time open source promoter and supporter, and both Sarah Gilai sees the same interest around the open source, and they see the business change, as you said, the different works that are happening in the food chain. And we were early to adopt open source and to create our offerings to the enterprises and to the telcos around open source. So you see it in the list of acquisitions that we have done and in our offerings. So for us, it's a game changer, and we are there to support both enterprises and telcos with their open source adoption journey.
Interesting. And I mean, we've seen companies like the acquisition between EMC and Dell recently that type of shift forced them to do big changes in their organization and their culture. Some of them go from public to be private. Do you see that type of, is that a change in that size, or is that, you know, something that is more modest in your view?
No, we see the change. I believe that our whole R&D development is aligned with this change, is aligned with the open source approach. So as you know, we have also a huge business for proprietary software. One of the business units in HP is HP Software that develops automation and monitoring and application lifecycle management portfolio. And we see also there the change of adopting different open source technologies. You mentioned containers, so we are heavily now integrated into containers. Just yesterday, we announced in our annual customer event in Vegas our approach together with Docker to support Docker Enterprise in each server that we sell. So we are bundling Docker Enterprise and Docker support to the servers that we sell. As you know, as the leader for server in the market, it's a huge announcement. So yes, we see a change in HP as well with regard to the open source adoption. Back to you, Nati.
Yeah, sorry, again, muted. Liaz, I think that's an excellent question for you as well. I mean, how do you see open source with Stratoscale?
First of all, as been said a lot in this conversation, OpenStack is standard. Nati, if you can mute, please. Thanks. OpenStack is a standard. Whenever we go to customer, to the field, in the private, the public, the hybrid cloud, OpenStack always comes up as a question about engines, about the API. I think all the vendors in the OpenStack ecosystem are being compared. Again, if you want to be innovative, if you want to succeed in this area, you need to understand that you have to comply with the standard, because the ecosystem, again, is big. Orchestration, even hardware, as Mellanox presented, everything now becomes an open system, and everything has to comply. And also we see it a lot in the brand. OpenStack involvement creates a strong brand. That was long proof, at least in the last 2 years. You have to be involved in OpenStack in order to present a strong brand to the market. To be involved means to contribute to OpenStack, to create bug reports so people understand that you're actually working with the product and bringing it into new edges. I mean, I'm sure people are actually Googling that before they getting involved with a company. Writing blog tutorials and being involved in thought leadership in OpenStack, just like in the OpenStack day, you just organized. If you're there, if you're having a booth in an OpenStack event, or you're giving a talk, or just publishing a tutorial, then that means you have a strong brand, and people are actually noticing this. And also in the hiring area, by the way, most of us are recruiting managers, and when you try to recruit people for a fast-growing startup like Stratoscale, the smart people starting to ask questions about OpenStack. We used to tell people about OpenStack and say to smart people, come and be involved with OpenStack. And now smart people actually asking, are you involved with OpenStack? How much do you contribute? And they ask to be involved. People saying, I want to be a guru in OpenStack, which is something that I think is a challenge now for the companies, that they need to give challenges for the smart people. But that means there are a lot of smart people now actually developing OpenStack, which is very good news. So thanks again for the great day.
Thanks, Elias. I think that goes to you, Frank.
Yeah, what we see, if you can mute, voilà, muted. So what we see is indeed companies are interested because, if I'm correct, maybe you remember the slide of the Israeli defense forces with three children sitting together and one alone. Now in this society you can't be alone anymore, and if you want to work together with other people you have to be open source so that people see what you're doing. That's also one of the reasons that why Rackspace open sourced OpenStack was a Facties fan. We are not going to do it alone. We want to have indeed people looking at our code but also helping us to say what way the code has to go and why we created the organization. And it's indeed so, like young developers, young talents are coming from the university, and those young guys, they want to show what they can. They want to show what they produce, and just sitting there and locking it up with closed source software ain't gonna work anymore to attract that talent.
Great, Dido. Why don't you have the last comment? I think that Mellanox is an interesting position on that regard. On one hand, you're contributing to OpenStack. On the other hand, you sell hardware gears. How does that work?
We mentioned before, Nati, is the activities of Mellanox in OpenStack. Today we have around 30 developers, engineers that are working in OpenStack communities. I think that Mellanox is the only Israeli company that has groups in Ra'anana, Yokneam, Ramallah, and also in Gaza that work on our CloudX activities and push and contribute code to almost 5-6 different projects like Newton, Nova, Cinder, Horizon, Ironic, Triple O, and also from this month to Watcher. I believe that we can build a great story as Mellanox in this community. We can provide another aspect to the cloud, the networking aspect. Today, most of the focus of the OpenStack activities is around the compute nodes and also only the cloud hypervisor. From Mellanox perspective, we see the cloud part as in the whole solution, from the cable into the NICs, into the switches and the cloud at the edge.
Excellent. So I think we're kind of wrapping up right now, and I wanted to kind of start close the discussion. I think that was a very interesting topics here to discuss here, and obviously we could spend an hour or so, even more, to discuss just the last question, at least in my view. Jeremy, why don't you talk a little bit about what's coming next during the year? Are we just doing the summits or the events, or is there meetups and other things that are happening during the year? Why did you comment about that?
Yeah. So first of all, we have OpenStackPodcast.com, which is where everyone can reach us and listen to our previous episodes and get other information, see other interesting interviews that have been done, some at the Austin Summit, some at OpenStack Day Israel. Of course, everyone can find us, the OpenStack Israel community, on Meetup, through LinkedIn. We have an OpenStack Global Community Facebook group. There's an OpenStack Community Slack group. There's a lot of action happening, and there are a lot of events that are going to be happening throughout the year. So we encourage everybody to join us and pitch in and give talks, be on the podcast for future events potentially as well. So thank you everybody for making it out for this podcast, and we really appreciate all your input and interesting discussion. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you guys in the near future.
Yeah, also in OpenStack New York, Jeremy.
Oh yeah, and OpenStack East. Sorry about that. OpenStack Day East is coming from August 23rd and 24th. So definitely don't miss that. The website is openstackeast.com.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Bye bye.